I was being brought to set in a wheelchair. Like, I couldn't walk that far. So I had to tell everybody because I needed help. You know, I needed someone to help me stand, and I needed someone to help. I needed someone to help me to get there.
After nearly 4 decades of silence, the actress who played Kelly Bundy has finally opened up about what really happened behind the scenes of Married with Children. The stories she shared were so unexpected, so deeply personal that even longtime fans of the show never saw this coming. What she exposed changes everything we thought we knew about America's favorite dysfunctional TV family. The secret bond nobody knew about. When Christina Applegate first walked onto the set of Married with Children in 1987, she was just 15 years old. She was a teenager stepping into one of the most controversial sitcoms in television history. The show was edgy, provocative, and pushed every boundary that network television allowed at the time. And right in the middle of all that chaos was a young girl who needed someone to look out for her. That someone turned out to be Ed O'Neill. What most people never realized is that Ed O'Neill took on a role far more important than playing Al Bundy. He became Christina's protector. He became her mentor. In many ways, he became the father figure she needed during one of the most vulnerable times in her life. And for 37 years, neither of them ever fully revealed just how deep that bond actually went. Ed O'Neill was in his early 40s when the show started. He had been through the ups and downs of Hollywood. He understood what this industry could do to young people, especially young women, who were suddenly thrust into the spotlight. Christina was playing Kelly Bundy, a character who was written as a teenage sex symbol. The jokes about Kelly were often suggestive. The outfits were revealing. The attention from fans and media could have easily gone to dark places, but Ed made sure that never happened. In rare interviews that most fans have never seen, Christina has talked about how Ed would shield her from certain conversations on set. He would step in when things got too adult. He would make sure that even though the show was pushing boundaries, the actual environment around Christina remained safe and professional. This was not something he was required to do. This was not part of his job description. This was Ed O'Neill choosing to be a genuinely good human being. Christina spent 11 years on that set. She went from being 15 to 26 during the show's run. Those are the years when a person forms their entire identity. Those are the years that shape who you become as an adult. And Christina has admitted that Ed's presence during those years fundamentally changed who she is today. The crew members who worked on Married with Children have shared stories over the years about watching this relationship develop. They would see Ed pull Christina aside between takes to check on her. They would notice him positioning himself near her during difficult scenes. They would watch as he quietly redirected conversations when they started heading in inappropriate directions around the young actress. This was not just acting. This was genuine care. There were moments that the cameras never captured. Times when Ed would drive Christina home after late-night shoots because he did not want her traveling alone. Times when he would call her mother to reassure her that her daughter was being looked after. Times when he would stand up to producers who wanted to push Christina into situations that made her uncomfortable. What makes their connection even more remarkable is how it evolved over time. In the early years, it was clearly a mentor and student relationship. Ed had the experience and Christina had the talent, but as the years went on, their dynamic shifted. Christina became more confident. She found her voice. And Ed watched with pride as the teenager he had taken under his wing transformed into a powerhouse performer in her own right. By the final seasons of Married with Children, Christina was no longer just following Ed's lead. She was holding her own. She was bringing ideas to the table. She was contributing to the creative process in ways that surprised even the most experienced members of the production team. And Ed could not have been prouder. And now, decades later, Christina has finally started revealing the full extent of what Ed meant to her during those formative years. But this secret bond was just the beginning of their story. Because what happened when the cameras stopped rolling was even more remarkable than what happened in front of them. The night everything almost fell apart. In 1989, something happened that threatened to destroy Married with Children completely. A woman named Terry Riculta from Michigan watched an episode called Her Cups Runneth Over and was so outraged that she launched a full-scale boycott campaign against the show. She contacted major advertisers. She wrote letters. She appeared on news programs. She was determined to get Married with Children music cancelled. And her campaign worked, at least at first. Coca-Cola pulled their advertising. McDonald's withdrew their support. Dozens of other major companies followed. The network was panicking. Executives were having emergency meetings. There were real conversations about ending the show right then and there. The situation felt hopeless for Christina. This was terrifying. Music, she was 17 years old. This show was her entire career. This was everything she had worked for. And suddenly it looked like it could all disappear because one woman in Michigan decided she did not like what she saw on television. The uncertainty was overwhelming for someone so young. But Ed O'Neill refused to let fear take over. What most people do not know is that during this crisis, Ed personally took it upon himself to calm the younger cast members. He sat down with Christina and David Faustino, who played her brother Bud, and told them that no matter what happened, they had created something special. He told them that the show might survive or it might not. But either way, they should be proud of what they had accomplished together. Ed also did something else that has rarely been discussed. He contacted the press himself. He gave interviews defending the show, but more importantly, defending the young people who worked on it. He made sure that in every conversation about the controversy, someone was speaking up for his TV kids. He refused to let them become collateral damage in a culture war. The boycott ultimately backfired in spectacular fashion. All the negative attention made people curious about this show they had never watched. Ratings actually went up, way up. The publicity that was supposed to destroy Married with Children ended up making it more popular than ever before. It was one of the most ironic turns in television history. But Christina has revealed that what she remembers most from that terrifying time was not the ratings. It was not the victory over the boycott. What she remembers most is Ed O'Neill standing by her side when everything seemed like it was falling apart. She remembers him being steady when everyone else was panicking. She remembers him showing her what it means to handle a crisis with grace and composure. The cast started wearing the boycott like a badge of honor. They would joke about it on set. They would reference it in interviews with pride. What had been meant to shame them had instead united them. They had been tested by fire and emerged stronger than ever. That experience bonded the cast together in ways that audiences never fully understood. They had faced potential destruction as a team and they had come out the other side stronger. But surviving that crisis together would prove to be just practice for what Christina and Ed would face decades later. The unfinished ending that haunted them both when Married with Children ended in 1997. It did not end the way anyone expected. There was no grand finale. There was no emotional goodbye episode. There was no closure for the characters or for the actors who had played them for over a decade. The show was simply cancelled, and that was that. One day they were filming new episodes. The next day they were not. For 11 years Ed and Christina had worked together almost every single day. They had celebrated birthdays together. They had watched each other grow and change. They had created hundreds of episodes of television that would go on to influence countless other shows. And then suddenly it was over. Christina has spoken about how strange that period was. One day you have this entire family around you. You have a routine. You have a place to go every morning. You have people who know you better than almost anyone else in your life. And then the next day, all of that just stops. The set gets torn down. Everyone goes their separate ways. The family you spent your formative years with suddenly scatters to the wind. The ending left a void that none of them were prepared for. They had been part of something special, something that had changed television. And now it was gone. There was no graduation ceremony. There was no celebration of what they had accomplished. Hollywood had simply moved on to the next thing. But what Christina has revealed is that she and Ed never truly separated. Even after the show ended, they maintained their connection. They would call each other. They would meet for meals. Ed would check in on her career, offering advice when she asked for it, and support even when she did not. The TV father and daughter relationship had become something very real. Christina went on to have a remarkable career after Married with Children. She appeared in films like The Sweetest Thing and Anchorman. She starred in other television shows like Samantha Who and Dead to Me. She won awards and earned critical acclaim. And through all of it, Ed was watching. He was proud of her in the way a father is proud of his daughter, not because he took credit for her success, but because he had seen her grow from a teenager into a formidable actress. Ed also found tremendous success after the show. He went on to star in Modern Family, one of the most beloved sitcoms of its era. He won multiple awards. He became even more famous than he had been as Al Bundy. But in interviews, when people would ask him about his career highlights, he would often bring up Christina. He would talk about watching her become the woman she is today. The lack of a proper ending to Married with Children has haunted both of them over the years. There have been countless discussions about doing a reunion. Every few years, the topic would come up in interviews. Fans would petition for it, networks would express interest, but for various reasons, it never happened. Until recently, most people assumed that a reunion was just a matter of scheduling and logistics. They assumed that eventually the stars would align and the Bundy family would return to television. But then something happened that changed everything. Something that made the possibility of a traditional reunion almost impossible. The devastating diagnosis. On August 10, 2021, Christina Applegate posted something on social media that stopped the world. She announced that she had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. The disease had been discovered a few months earlier while she was filming the final season of her Netflix show, Dead to Me. And just like that, everything changed. Nothing would ever be the same. Multiple sclerosis is a chronic disease that affects the central nervous system. It can cause problems with mobility, balance, vision, and cognitive function. There is no cure. The symptoms can be managed, but the disease never goes away. For Christina, this diagnosis meant that her entire life had to be restructured from the ground up. She now uses a cane to walk. She has talked openly about experiencing cognitive fog that makes certain tasks difficult. She has had to accept that her body has changed in ways she never anticipated. The woman who once played the most desirable teenager on television now struggles with basic movements that most people take for granted. Every day brings new challenges. The diagnosis was not just physical. It was emotional. Christina has been honest about the grief she has experienced. Grief for the life she thought she would have. Grief for the future she had planned. Grief for the version of herself that existed before the diagnosis. She has had to mourn while still living, which is one of the hardest things any person can do. What Christina revealed about Ed O'Neill's response to her diagnosis shows the true depth of their relationship. When Ed found out about her illness, he immediately reached out. He did not just send a text message or a brief phone call. He made sure Christina knew that he was there for her. He expressed his love and support in ways that went far beyond what former co-workers typically do for each other. The entire Married with Children cast rallied around Christina. Katie Siegel, who played her mother, Peggy Bundy, has been particularly vocal about supporting Christina through this difficult time. David Faustino has posted messages of love and encouragement. Amanda Barrers, who played neighbor Marcy, has also shown her support. But it was Ed's response that meant the most to Christina. He was still being her protector after all these years. In discussing her illness, Christina has been remarkably open about the emotional impact it has had on her. She has talked about grief. She has talked about anger. She has talked about the loss of the life she thought she would have. And in all of those conversations, she has mentioned how important it has been to have people from her past who truly know her and truly love her. The diagnosis also raised serious questions about any potential Married with Children reunion. A traditional production would require long hours on set. It would require physical demands that Christina simply cannot meet right now. For fans hoping to see the Bundys reunite on screen, the diagnosis seemed like it might have closed that door forever. But Ed O'Neill and the rest of the cast made something very clear. Any reunion would be designed around Christina's needs. They would not do it without her. They would not replace her. They would find a way to make it work, whatever that looked like. The Bundy family was not complete without Kelly. Period. This commitment from her former castmates gave Christina something she desperately needed during one of the darkest periods of her life. It gave her a reminder that the family they had created on that soundstage was real. It was not just a job. It was not just acting. The love between them was genuine, and it would not disappear just because circumstances had changed. The standing ovation that made everyone cry in November 2022. Christina Applegate made her first major public appearance since revealing her MS diagnosis. She was being honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. For someone dealing with a chronic illness that affects mobility and energy, just showing up to an event like this required tremendous courage. Many people in her situation would have stayed home. Christina refused to hide. She arrived using a cane. Her movements were slower than they used to be, but she was there. She was present, and she was surrounded by people who loved her. The crowd that gathered was enormous. Fans had traveled from all over to witness this moment. Katie Sagal was there to support her TV daughter. Other friends and colleagues showed up to celebrate Christina's career and her bravery in facing her illness publicly. The ceremony was emotional from the very beginning. But what Christina said during her speech left everyone in tears. She talked about her diagnosis openly. She talked about the fear and uncertainty she had faced. She talked about what it meant to have people, music, in her life who had shown up for her when things got hard. And she talked about the early days of her career, about Married with Children, about the people who had helped shape her into the person she had become. Her voice cracked with emotion, but she never stopped speaking. 2 months later came another moment that would be seared into the memories of everyone who witnessed it. Christina Applegate appeared at the Emmy Awards in January 2023. She walked onto that stage with her cane, and the audience did something spontaneous and overwhelming. They stood up. Every single person in that room rose to their feet and they kept applauding. The standing ovation lasted nearly a full minute, which in television time feels like an eternity. Christina stood there visibly emotional as wave after wave of support washed over her. The applause seemed like it would never end. In her typical fashion, she used humor to cope with the overwhelming emotion of the moment. As the crowd continued to shake from the thunderous applause, she quipped that they were shaking her brain. The audience laughed through their tears. Christina managed to be both heartbreaking and hilarious at the same time. It was a perfect encapsulation of who she is. What most people watching at home did not know was what happened after the cameras stopped rolling. Christina has spoken about how that night reaffirmed her connections to the entertainment community. People she had worked with decades ago came up to her throughout the evening. Old friends reached out. Former castmates checked in. The outpouring of love was overwhelming. Ed O'Neill was among those who made sure Christina knew she was loved. Their exchanges that night, though private, reflected the same dynamic that had existed since she was 15 years old. He was still looking out for her. He was still making sure she was okay. The TV father was still being a real one. These public appearances proved something important. They proved that Christina Applegate, despite everything she was going through, was not going to disappear. She was going to face her challenges publicly. She was going to use her platform to raise awareness about MS. And she was going to do it all while maintaining the wit and warmth that had made audiences fall in love with her in the first place. Over the years, various stories have emerged about what really happened behind the scenes of Married with Children. But there are still stories that have never been widely shared. Stories that only the cast members know. Stories that Christina has only recently started to reveal. These hidden details paint a picture of a production that was far more meaningful than anyone realized. The hidden stories they never told anyone. One story involves the famous improvisation that happened on set. Married with Children was not as strictly scripted as many other sitcoms of its era. The cast was given freedom to play with their lines, to try different things, to see what worked. This created an atmosphere of creative experimentation that led to some of the show's most iconic moments. Ed O'Neill was particularly skilled at improvisation. His background in theater had given him the tools to think on his feet, to respond in the moment, to find humor in unexpected places, and he used those skills not just for the show, but to help his younger castmates learn the craft. He was a teacher as much as he was a performer. Christina has talked about Ed teaching her how to be spontaneous on camera. He would throw her curveballs during scenes, forcing her to react authentically. He would change his line delivery to see how she would adjust. These were not tricks to make her look bad. These were lessons to make her better. He was investing in her future as an actress. Another hidden detail involves the way the cast handled the more controversial aspect.